Believe me, if I had known that day what Karen was about to pull, I would have buried her dreams in the ground before she even had the chance to draw a map. But fate has a way of letting fools trap themselves. And Karen was the kind of fool who thought she could outsmart the dirt beneath her designer shoes. It all began on a late Wednesday evening when I saw 4 HOA board members standing at my farm gate, their city shoes sinking into mud like they had wandered straight out of a glossy brochure and accidentally stumbled into reality. Their leader, if you could call him that, was a tall man with a nervous twitch, but even a blind man could see he wasn't really in charge. The woman next to him, Karen, was the one calling the shots. She stood there with a smug grin stretched so wide I half expected her face to split in two. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a rusty shovel. These people from the HOA claimed my farm was dragging down their precious property values, staining the exclusive reputation of their neighborhood. According to them, it was high time I packed up, sold off, and vanished into the hills. What they didn't realize was that my farm had been standing on this soil for decades before their overpriced cookie-cutter houses ever existed. Half of their beloved community was built on land that once belonged to me. Some of the very streets they bragged about were paved on ground I had sold them. And now they had the audacity to tell me to leave? That was the kind of comedy I hadn't paid tickets for. Karen, puffed up like a queen on parade, glared at me like the war was already won. Her 3 fellow board members looked more like prisoners dragged into battle they never signed up for, their eyes darting around as if silently pleading to be anywhere else. Then came their so-called generous offer. They said the HOA was willing to buy my farm for a price so laughably low it couldn't have fixed the roof on my oldest barn. I laughed so hard I had to lean against the gate to keep from falling over. That was the moment I stopped being amused and started getting curious. Something about their little crusade reeked of desperation, and the stench had Karen's fingerprints all over it. Sure enough, the very next morning, a crisp envelope appeared in my mailbox, stamped with the HOA letterhead as though it were some royal decree. Inside, the letter declared that I had exactly 60 days to vacate my land or sell it to them, preferably to them. It wasn't worded as a suggestion, but as a command. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted me erased. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping bitter coffee, staring at those words, and each time I read them, the more absurd they became. They thought they could push me out of the very soil that raised me, fed me, and even funded the houses they were living in. Not happening. I decided not to burn the letter, but to dig deeper into the madness that fueled it. So I started asking questions, making calls, pulling on the strings of contacts I'd gathered over years of business. It didn't take long for the truth to bubble up like oil. Karen wasn't fighting this battle out of civic duty or neighborly concern. She was drowning. Word spread that her house was weeks away from foreclosure, the bank already circling like vultures. She needed a big win and fast. Suddenly, her motives made perfect sense. If she could bully me into selling my farm for pennies, she'd flip it for double, bail herself out of debt, and polish her fake crown as the savior of the HOA. That was when the devilish idea hit me. If she wanted land so badly, I'd give her something else to choke on. Through a shell company, an LLC, I had set up for moments exactly like this, I went straight to her mortgage lender. With a few signatures, some wired cash, and not a single ounce of fanfare, I became the proud hidden owner of Karen's house. The delicious irony was almost too much. While she was plotting to run me off my farm, I had quietly bought the very floor under her pampered feet. The best part was that she had no clue. About a month later, when the dust seemed to settle, Karen came storming up my driveway like some sheriff from an old spaghetti western. Except instead of a badge, she carried nothing but a loud mouth and a cloud of cheap perfume. She banged on my gate so hard the rusty latch rattled, her heels sinking deeper into the dirt with every stomp. "Why haven't you left yet?" she screeched, her voice bouncing off the barn walls. "It's been a month." "You're supposed to be packing, not planting more crops." Her face was beet red, her finger jabbing at me through the bars like a spear. And I swear the cows lined up just to watch the show, their big brown eyes blinking in amusement. I leaned casually against the fence post, letting her rant and rave, savoring every second of her meltdown. She had no idea she was screaming at the man who now owned her roof, her walls, and the fancy kitchen she bragged about over HOA brunches. The LLC had kept me invisible. To her, the buyer of her house was just some mysterious stranger kind enough to let her stay until he decided otherwise. If only she knew that stranger was standing right in front of her, wearing muddy boots and holding a pitchfork. Her tantrum spiraled into threats of legal action, HOA bylaws, and promises that I'd be sorry when the community forced me out. I smirked, not because her threats scared me, but because they were hollow echoes in the wind. The more she yelled, the more ridiculous it became, her voice cracking, arms flailing, until the workers in my fields paused just to laugh at the free theater. I could have ended it all right there, revealed the truth, ripped away her last illusion. But patience has always been my sharpest blade. Timing mattered. I wanted her downfall to sting so deeply that she'd never again dream of crossing me or anyone else. So I stayed quiet, nodded like I was listening, and let her storm off with her fake sense of power intact. What she didn't know was that I was already planning the perfect moment to flip her fragile little HOA kingdom upside down. Believe me, if I had known that day what Karen was about to pull, I would have buried her dreams in the ground before she even had the chance to draw a map. Instead, I kept my boots on and let the plan grow quiet and steady like a winter crop. After she hollered at my gate, I moved slow and precise. Paperwork through the LLC, anonymous calls to the mortgage holder, legal counsel who loved setting up dominoes. I gathered what mattered. Recorded boasts where she bragged about flipping property values, invoices and lien notices that painted a clearer picture of her own scramble, and the private grudges of neighbors who'd been fined or shamed into silence. Once the evidence folder filled, stagecraft took the place of rage. On a busy Saturday, I arranged for a delivery to stall just within sight of her manicured lawn. A hay load, misdirected, spilling like a gentle insult into the cul-de-sac. She burst out in curlers and slippers, shrieking at the intruder, making herself the spectacle. That was the cue. The agent I'd quietly lined up stepped forward with clean, stamped documents proving the mortgage payoff and transfer of title. Cameras, held by people who wanted the truth on record, clicked and recorded. The air in the neighborhood shifted from snickers to stunned silence as the paper landed on her porch like a verdict. She sputtered about fraud, but the trail was tidy and lawful. The money traceable, the signatures real. I then funneled the recordings and invoices into the HOA's official files under the guise of a concerned resident. What followed was predictable and delicious. Board members who had stood in my gate suddenly found their voices small and their stances awkward as questions about selective enforcement. Conflict of interest and undisclosed financial turmoil bubbled up like a spring. Karen tried her old tricks, loud accusations, theatrical indignation, but the community had receipts now. The bylaws she used as a weapon became the very framework that exposed how she'd wielded power. At the emergency meeting, her bravado cracked. Neighbors who had swallowed years of petty punishments began to speak, and the attorney calmly explained the HOA's exposure if it had knowingly targeted a homeowner without cause. The spotlight that had once served her vanity became a harsh lamp that revealed every seam. When the mortgage company confirmed the payoff in person and the title clerk quietly verified the transfer, the realization hit her in real time. The foundation she'd leaned on was paper thin. She packed with the hurried motion of someone whose script had been ripped away, a stack of boxes, embarrassed calls, the blank looks of former allies who'd preferred comfort to courage. I could have paraded her humiliation, but humiliation isn't justice. Accountability is. So I placed a single bale of hay on her lawn, propped a small painted sign that read, "Farmhouse," and let the symbol do the talking. Word traveled fast. Apologies, whispered confessions, and a few hearty laughs came my way as neighbors admitted relief that the small tyranny had been exposed. Rumor said she moved towns, renting a modest place while she tried to stitch together a quieter life. Whether she learned anything lasting matters less than the fact that the neighborhood no longer bowed to petty policing. I kept the farm and the sense that the best revenge is often quiet, methodical, and utterly fair. Documentation, patience, and letting the truth do the heavy lifting. In the end, the lesson was stubborn and plain. Those who spend their lives policing other people's happiness are rarely prepared for their own unraveling, and a man who tends land and patience can harvest consequences that are, in their own wry way, beautiful.